Iran is issuing a sharp new warning to the United States. Iran's parliament speaker says if U.S. forces launch a ground invasion, Tehran's troops are ready to, quote, set them on fire. The threat comes as thousands of U.S. troops move into the region, and Pakistan's foreign minister says it will soon host talks between the U.S. and Iran. Chief correspondent Jonathan Hunt is in Tel Aviv with the latest for us. Jonathan.
John, a U.S. ground operation may be on the way, and it could happen very soon. That is doing little, though, to deter Iran from continuing to attack Israel and its Gulf neighbors. A missile slammed into southern Israel near the town of Beersheba today, sending a huge plume of gray smoke over the area. Apparently it was some sort of chemical facility that was hit. Local residents were told to keep their windows shut and their air conditioning off because of the toxic fumes produced as a result of that strike. Meantime, the U.S. continues to hit targets throughout Iran, missile launchers and military manufacturing installations among the most recent targets for U.S. aircraft. As those 2,500 Marines you mentioned arrive aboard the USS Tripoli, they would be probably the spearhead for any sort of U.S. ground operation that President Trump decides to order. But Iranian officials are saying they are ready for whatever the U.S. does next, and they are mocking President Trump's decision-making. Listen here.
At one moment, he speaks of negotiations, and shortly afterward, he decides to manage the war. This unbalanced and deceitful individual has inflicted extensive damage on the people of the United States, Europe, and countries around the world, especially the countries of West Asia.
Israel, meantime, is also focusing on the northern front here, its battle against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Prime Minister Netanyahu said today that he will expand what he calls a security zone into southern Lebanon. He calls it expanding a security zone. Many others call it an invasion, once again, of Lebanon. John?
Plenty of controversy in the United States about the Iran war. What about in Israel? Is there a consensus there?
I think in this wartime moment in which the Israelis find themselves right now, they back the idea, certainly, of regime change in Iran. They back the idea of crushing Hezbollah in Lebanon, but they don't want this to be open-ended. The Israeli people, John, are absolutely exhausted. They have gone 3 years, of course, 3 years and more since the attacks of October 7th, with, it seems to many of them, unending war. And I think what they would like to know from Prime Minister Netanyahu is when this will end, how it will end. And it will be interesting as we go forward this year. Netanyahu is under a time crunch for the elections. He has to call elections here by the end of October. It will be interesting then to see how the Israeli people react to what he has done over the last 3 years and how he prosecutes these wars in the coming months. John?
All right, Jonathan Hunt reporting live from Tel Aviv. Jonathan, thank you. For more on this, let's bring in retired Navy Captain Bob Wells. So 3,500 Marines moving into the theater there, Captain Wells. How would you imagine they get used? The president has talked about no boots on the ground. Does this suggest that there will be?
Well, thank you again, John, for having me. Certainly the Tripoli and its associated Marine Expeditionary Unit has the forcible entry capability to conduct any particular options. Obviously, the planners at CENTCOM are focused on reopening the Strait of Hormuz, also the IRGC positions throughout the Persian Gulf, even outside the Persian Gulf, in terms of where they physically are. I would say welcome aboard to the Marines. Welcome aboard to the operating forces, the naval forces that are outside the Persian Gulf, the North Arabian Sea. Quite a bit of firepower, Tomahawk strike firepower, naval gunfire support, armed helicopters, persistent surveillance. Just looking at it before we go into any particular option that the president represents, I really think we're in the third quarter of this particular operation for Epic Fury. And I do think the IRGC is going to lose.
The Strait of Hormuz, obviously the choke point there that has prevented so much of the world's energy, fertilizer, food from getting through. Are the Marines going to be involved, do you think, in making sure that that is reopened?
If that's part of their mission set, obviously you have the gate guard. I've been through there dozens and dozens of times listening to the IRGC in Larak Island or off of Keshem. Notice that the American warships are coming through the Strait of Hormuz. It's got about a 2 nautical mile separation in the international waterway. But what the Iranians have done in the last week is put a new toll gate in between Larak and also Keshem. I would say that based on the planning, they would try to take out those particular toll gates so that Iran does not have the power to say yes to what is transiting the Strait of Hormuz, and things go back to its internationally recognized transit areas. They are formidable, though. They are a force to be reckoned with. So I think the Marine Corps, if they chose a forcible entry option, not only looking at the Strait of Hormuz, but also looking at other places outside the Strait of Hormuz, like Jask, which is another export area for Iran for their oil, or even Karg Island.
What about the uranium? We know the Iranians have been enriching it. Even if it's not on board a missile, it is dangerous. A U.S. Army Special Forces veteran, Jim Hansen, says we have a lot to be concerned about there. Listen.
One of the main things we have to get is the enriched uranium. They either have to give that up or maybe we go get it. It's a hellish concept to think we have to go underground and try to grab that stuff and leave. But that's one of the potential missions for those guys.
Is that, in fact, one of the potential missions for the Marines who are out there on the Iwo Jima?
I think it would be a mission for example, the Special Forces, specifically focusing on that particular mission set, looking at what they achieved with Osama bin Laden, in fact, in Abbottabad, recalling that mission. Also, the 82nd Airborne. The Marines, I think, are focused on the littoral areas of Iran and looking at trying to support a broader strategy of making sure that we protect the Gulf cooperation nations. This is the largest, energy seas in history, and we need to basically free up the Strait and the Persian Gulf in order to set the conditions to actually have a new regime in the Persian Gulf for the free transport of oil, helium, fertilizer, et cetera, that are all being produced on the Arab side.
Karg Island is Iran's largest shipment point for its energy, the energy that comes out of the ground there. Some have speculated that the Marines might go in and essentially seize it, but there's also a large IRGC, Revolutionary Guard force, on the island, is there not?
There is, and I think they're employing a porcupine strategy, and it's dangerous. Obviously, we hit some of the targets on Karg Island from the air, but I think there's a school of thought that would argue that we need to basically be creative, continue to allow the Iranian tankers to be berthed there, maybe not let them get underway. They're very vulnerable to their political economy with their oil exports there. But I do think the focus, the critical focus of efforts got to be the Strait of Hormuz. There's other transit passage areas off of the Emirates and Oman that could be used to get to the international waterway. We need to continue the Fury operation to reduce the risk to the ballistic missiles and also the drone warfare.
Retired Navy Captain Bob Wells. Captain Wells, thank you.
Thank you again, John.
You bet.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.